these materials under a particular license from University of Michigan. This is the training. This most means I made only minor changes in the material. The material is from the University of Michigan because they have a wonderful course on Python. Sorry, yeah, that is what I use. Just like we follow Andrew Ng, 80% of our machine learning is from Andrew Ng's curriculum. Of course, I added like a couple of other places like MIT and Columbia for a few modules, but it's a combination of those three. Whereas the Python is mainly from, especially at the basic Python, is entirely from the University of Michigan. But when we go to the next stage, I mean, we may pull information from some other source. But right now, that's what it is. So just wanted to acknowledge the makers and those who created these materials. It's amazing. So let's get started. You know, like in computer science, you all, whenever you, those who have studied computer science, you might have studied a paper called data structures, right? Anybody remembering which book you studied? There are only 2-3 books popular. Those who studied in India, there's a popular book.
It was a big blue book. It's a thick book.
Dijkstra?
Yeah. There is 2 books. One is called, there is a Sahani, there is an Indian author. So he has that a beautiful book. And there is a foreign author book, which is called Tremblay and Sorensen. These were those who studied late 90s or early 90s. This is the book you might have studied. Even now, these books are very popular. So what is a data structure? Because the computer, the very definition of the computer is a data processing machine. So computer operates on data, and how to organize your data in a computer program, how to model it. And that is what is data structure. It's an extremely important topic. And then what exactly means, there are all these are means the basic data types you all know. So I'm not going to do a computer science one-on-one class, but let's go directly into the collection. What is not a collection and what is a collection? Anybody? A variable, whenever you use a variable, you can use that variable as a collection and you can use as a atomic value.
So when you group the variables, you group them into a collection.
Right. One example?
List.
List. Okay.
Dictionary.
Array.
Dictionary.
Yeah. Those are new data data types. But in olden days, you had arrays, right? Those that's one example. And that's what it is.
Structure.
What is it?
I think that there is list, map, sets, and tuples.
Yep. Those are the popular ones. Exactly. And from programming language to programming language, it varies. And the difference is the traditional variable or the atomic variable, you can have only one value. So if you say x equal to 2, and suppose you wanted to store another value, if you say x equal to 4, what is going to happen? 2 will be overwritten. So that is not a collection. And in data structure world, you call it as atomic. Whereas a list means it's a kind of collection. Collection means it allows us to use more than one values in a single variable. That is the traditional definition of a collection. If you go to a data structure book, that's what you see. And the collection is very valuable because you may need to keep a set of values associated with a particular grouping. And that is what is called collection. For example, suppose you wanted to collect all your friends' name. You can always have a group or a collection called friends. So carry on, you can have multiple values there. So here, when you talk about a list in data structure, you might have studied something called linked list. Do you remember?
Yes.
Yeah. What is the difference between an array and a linked list?
So arrays have got indices, and like every every successive entry in an array is stored contiguously.
Right.
Whereas in a linked list, you have pointers to the next element.
Correct.
So they can be stored anywhere in the memory space.
Right. That is the key difference. Linked list, the beauty is that like each memory location is separately defined, and that the connection between one location to the other is through a pointer. So that is exactly what the change is. So in an array, right, if you declare an array of integer, can you store a different value in an element? Everything has to be integer, correct?
Mm-hmm.
That is one difference. Whereas in a linked list, you can do, one can be an integer, other can be a string, other can be a float, other can be a boolean, because linked lists are nothing but a set of different variables connected through pointers. That's exactly it is. So that is what the definition of list. So list means they are surrounded. Means how do you declare in Python? Means you put a square bracket and then you put the different elements as sequence. So it need not be uniform. Like in this example, the first example, you create a linked list of 124 and 76. Means it happened to be everything integer. The second one, everything happened to be string. But when you look at the third example, you can see red 24 and 96.8. That means they're completely heterogeneous. So how it works is it creates 3 different locations in the memory, and each of these locations will have corresponding value, because the storage requirement for a integer is different from the storage requirement for a float, and that is totally different from the storage requirement for a string. So each one will have its own memory location. But what happens? There will be an additional attribute which links the one location to the other. So the first item in the list will be linked to the next item in the list and the next item in the list. So that is how the list is organized. You might have studied some difference between array and linked list. Array, it's it will be faster. The linked list is kind of slow. Why? Because array means if you know that your first number, if it is an integer of array, right? So the first number is location 50. If an integer takes, say, 10 bytes to store or 16 bytes to store, then what would be the next? If you say the index 1, it will be easily automatically calculatable, because it is a continuously stored, right? Means in the memory. Whereas linked list might be first item would be stored in address 100, the second item would be 32,750, wherever the memory is available, right? Wherever the garbage collector and the OS allocates the space, it will be spread all over the memory. So traversing through one list to the other, it will take more time compared to an array. And then the second thing is a list can be any object. And even another list, you can have one list embedded in another list. So even that is possible. So when you embed another list in a list, means that will be considered as one element and it will be treated as a list. That's how it is. And a list you can create as an empty list, and then you can append values to that. So the purpose of what we are covering today is we are going to introduce the essential things you need to understand for using this in machine learning. And then when we studied the for loop and the while loop, we said that the for loop and the while loop can be used with sequence. And this one, the list is considered as a sequence, just like a string, just like a range, just like everything else. This is considered as a sequence. So what you do is you do for I in a sequence. That is the formula. So you can use a hard-coded list and you can use a list variable. For example, you can create a list L. In that list, you create all these value. And if that is the case, you can just use for I in L, and print I means this will exactly like this, it will be printed. Because if you remember what is for loop, every time the for loop executes, the I gets the first item in the list or the sequence, and next time it gets the next item in the sequence. So just a question. I'm not going to answer. You may want to go and do it. Let's say that if there is a sequence within the sequence. So the sequence is like 5, 4, 3, and the next element is a sequence 1, 2, 3. And if you do this particular command, what is going to happen?
It will print the, whenever it gets to the embedded sequence, it will print the entire sequence in one like square bracket.
Exactly. So that I would be a list, whereas in other cases, the I would be atomic. See, the value of I will be assigned in every iteration. That's what happened. That's a correct answer. But please go and do it. You'll see that.
So Rajaji, I had a question.
Yeah.
Now, since Python is loosely typed, how can you differentiate between an array and a list by just looking at the declaration? Because both of them come in square brackets.
Yeah. First of all, Python, the array is not direct. You need to use a library or a separate library to use it. So Python do not have a direct array, first of all. So this one is a list. So array, it will be handled slightly different. You have to use a command called array and have to create it separately. So that's it. And I'll show you array a little bit later.
Okay.
Okay, so that's good. So the next one is list and loops, right? So here define a list called friends, and for friend in friends, print Happy New Year friend. What is going to happen?
It's going to print Happy New Year for every one of those people.
Right. And what is the difference between this and this, the second one?
It's the same.
No difference.
The same.
It's just
So, yeah.
variables.
Yep. Exactly the same. So let's go to the next example. So when you look at a list, what is going to happen is, so just like strings, right? The 0th index of a list would be the first element. First index would be the second element. Because remember, when we started the machine learning itself, I said like the index can be of two types. One is 0-based index and one is 1-based index. Some languages use the 1-based index and the other is 0. Python is 0. So, I mean, suppose you wanted to access, this is a list. Let's say that you have a list called friends. Let's go here. You have a list called friends, and what you are doing is, sorry, did I go through the next one? Okay, yeah. Okay. This is blocking me. Okay. So you have a list called friends, and if you say 1, which one will print?
Second one.
Correct. You know that it is indexed. And the thing is, the next point is that this lists are mutable. Mutable means what? Mutable means if it is an array, right? If it is a string, like let's say that G1 is a string, right? S equal to G1. Potentially, I can access all the elements. Say name index 1 means you can access the second character of that string. But have you ever tried to change one character of a string? It will give an error, right? So if in this particular example, if fruit equal to banana, fruit of 0, it will print B. But if you try to assign, right? If you try to reassign fruit of 0 as B, Python will give an error, meaning it is immutable. You cannot change the content, means a subset of a string. What you have to do is you have to assign a new string. That is the only option. Whereas in the case of list, it is mutable. You can change just one element because that is how it is constructed, right? It's a linked list. So that's what it is. So the next point is lists are mutable. And how long is a list?
Rajesh.
Yeah.
In other languages, you can have offset and index within a string and change
Right.
parts of a string, right? That
Yeah. Some other
here,
language you
I
can
understand.
change. It's Python.
Yeah.
Python, it is immutable.
Oh,
Well,
okay.
actually, Java is exactly like Python. Strings are immutable in Java.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think C you can change, right?
You can change, yeah.
Yeah,
C
even
you can
in
change.
Java, actually, you can change. Once you create a string, you can change the value. But what will happen is it will, behind the scene, it will create a new object.
No, so actually in Java, you can Google this. Java strings are immutable.
Yeah, they are immutable. But in the behind the scene, what will happen is it will create a new object. So that's what is like the whatever the original object created, it will be there forever. You cannot change that value.
Right, so that's why to modify a Java string, you use string builder or string buffer. But yeah.
So that will update the string builder, string buffer will update the same memory location. But in case of regular string, if you try to change, it will create a new object basically.
Yeah. But in Python, it is 100% sure it is immutable. That's one notable difference between string and list.
Yeah.
So
and Java is identical in this regard.
Yep. And the length means there is a function called length. Remember, it is a function. It is not a method of a class. It is a standard Python function. So if you use length of a list, what it says, what it tells.
The size of the list, number of elements.
How many elements are there in that sequence? That's it. So let me ask you a question. Again, not giving you the answer. You can try that later. If there is an embedded list, let's say that it is 1, 2, and then a list 1, 2, 3, and then 99. If you take the length, how much you get? Any guess?
Same number.
Yep.
Still say 4, yeah.
Yep. Okay. So then you might have seen the function range. Again, it's a standard function in Python, which returns what a range function returns is a list. We don't know. Even we don't have to create it. But the moment you say use the function range, what that function returns is a list. So if you say range 4, what it will return is it's a list from 0 to whatever is that range you said, -1. So that's what it is. So then what happened? Like somebody's trying to join and they cannot join.
No, this is from Hangouts. This tone is from Hangouts.
Google Hangout.
Yeah.
Oh,
Someone got a private call.
Oh, okay, no problem. Yeah. That's fine. Totally fine. I was just trying to see that if somebody is trying to get into our call and not able to join, right? Okay. So then, see, typically we use this function range. It is for creating an index for a for loop. Typically with for loop, we use that. So that's what it is. So now, can you tell me the difference between these two programs, since you know this much? So you have a list and you have two loops. What is the difference between these loops? You may get the same output, but what is the difference in implementation?
The second one is doing the len of friends, which is basically 3 or 4 rather. And then it's using that to loop
Length
through.
is 3, right? Only
Right.
3 elements are there.
3 elements, right? Sorry, yeah. 0, 1, 0, 1, 2 then. Yeah. And just looping through that.
Yeah. So what is the difference? What happens in the first?
So the second one basically uses the indices to iterate over the list. Whereas in the first one, you're using a different, like an enhanced for loop.
Right. So there's a major difference. That difference is the range of, means the sequence used in the for loops. So for the first for loop, the sequence is the list friends itself. So the value of the variable friend in the first iteration will be Joseph. Whereas in the case of second for loop, the range or the sequence is not Joseph, Glenn, and Sally. It will be 0, 1, and 2. And then using that 0, 1, and 2, you are extracting the value of the from the second list. So the value of I in the first iteration would be 0. Whereas the value of the friend in the first iteration or the previous one, it is Joseph. Got the difference, right?
Yeah, you're right.
Okay. So just understand this. This is means this, you won't understand this.
Can you just repeat that once again?
Okay. So in the first case, what means when you use for loop will have an index and there is a sequence. That is the syntax of for loop, right?
Yeah.
If you remember.
Yeah.
So in the case of the first for loop, the sequence is a list of friends.
Correct.
Whereas in the case of second example, the sequence is not the list of friends. It is a range. It is a new list created by the range function. And that range function is going to create a list 0, 1, and 2. So what I was saying is that the index variable during the first iteration of the first loop, it will be Joseph. And the index variable in the second loop in the first iteration would be 0.
No, but zero will still translate into Joseph, right?
No, not directly, right? So you're extracting that. Using that index, you are pulling the value from the another list. That is
Correct.
what it means.
Right. But then the value of friend is still going to be
Correct.
Joseph.
Correct. That's what the final output will be exactly the same, but how you are deriving that final output is totally different.
Yeah, correct. Thanks.
Got it. Okay, excellent. So let's go.
So actually, the second for loop is having is really powerful in case of two list comparison, or in case of any
but it is
operation.
more overhead also, right? So you are creating one list and you are keeping the indices, and then you are extracting that from one loop. So if you are trying to use to compare the values from two lists, second options would be better. But if you are just printing, I would go only with the first one, right?
Yeah, it depends upon what we are using it.
Yeah,
actually,
that's exactly the reason why
yeah.
I just wanted to introduce both. And also this is see, the purpose of introducing here is to show that, see, this is a list and this is a list, and these two lists are completely different. And the range function, whenever you use, the return of that range function is always a list.
Would there be any performance difference?
Yeah.
Of course. The first one will be faster in this particular case. But the point Sanjita was telling earlier is valid, right? So sometimes you may want to compare the elements of two lists. If that is the case, second would be better.
In real-time scenario, right? Just printing a list is not going to be.
No, not at all. But some cases you may have to, keep in mind all these things.
Sure.
See,
Rajesh, there is a function called enum or enumerate, which returns both the index as well as the element.
Right. There are. And now, so far in your programs, even at work, whatever you do, you never bothered about the performance. But when it comes to machine learning, that's going to be a huge matter thing, right? Because you're not talking about one or two elements in the data set. I was just doing a sample for our neural networks, just to introduce you guys. So the data set is like a 10 million or 20 million. So the difference, it means you can put start the code running and you can go have a tea, come back, it will be still running. You might have experienced this in COBOL and all when you studied in the college. So you can see that much. So the performance difference can make a lot of difference. Now, concatenating list, it's very easy. See, the Python language means, in my experience, I have seen a lot of languages, but this is a very simple language. So you can just concatenate, means you can just say plus. There is a concept called this in object-oriented programming. There is a concept, means for using the standard operator for a different purpose. Anybody remembering that? That's not required for Python, but just to
operation overload.
Operator overload.
Operator
This is
overload.
exactly what happened here. So, and this is a standard operator overloading, and you can make custom operator overloading using object-oriented programming. That's just an FYI. So here you have one list, you have another list. What you are doing is just summing it up. So it is a summation of this.
Hey, Rajesh, one question.
Yeah.
You used a homogeneous data set here.
Yeah.
Instead of homogeneous, can I use a string in the set B and then still it would add?
Oh, of course, because the reason is Python list is heterogeneous.
Okay. So if it is an array, then it will not happen, right?
No.
Okay.
No, not at all. That is the beauty here.
Okay.
And technically, Mahesh, right? So this 5 can be another list. Even then you can sum it.
So is it summing up or is it just appending here, Rajesh?
It's concatenating. That is why it is called operator overloading. It is not summing it up. It is concatenating.
Okay.
So just appending it. That's what happens. So a new list is created by appending the values of list 1 and list 2. Okay. So how to slice a list? That is the next question. So look at this. You have a list with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 2, 4, 6 elements. So suppose you wanted to slice. You just need to use 1 to 3 means what happens. So the first element and the one before 3. So that's how the indices work in Python. So the first element, and it will take all the elements before 3. I think we talked about these indices, means how to take a subset when we studied string. Exactly the same rule happens here. You can use negative index. You can use, say, colon means 4. What happens? From 0, it happens. So exactly the same rule. So 3 colon, what is going to happen?
From the third element, the rest of the items.
Exactly. That's it. So it's the same rules. Strings, whatever we studied in string, it is going to happen. So you can see all the list methods. Means there is a lot of methods like append, count, extend, index, insert, pop, remove, reverse, sort. Just go to this place and just have a quick reference. It will be useful. Means most of them are self-explanatory. We can do that. And by the way, this is the standard reference for the Python, because this is the Python itself tutorial. They give a good tutorial. Okay, so now how to build a list from the scratch. So you can use a list function. So this list function will return means this variable. What is going to happen? Can you tell me what happens internally? There is an empty list will be created, and that will be stored in the variable stuff. So Python don't talk about pointers, but internally what is happening is a pointer.
Yeah.
What exactly is a pointer?
It's an address.
Correct. That's it. So what means it will point to a location where the first variable will be created. And when you say append, what is going to happen? To be specific, it may not be even the address of a variable. It will just say that if you go to that location, it will tell you the details of the list. That's it. The function append is used to append a value to a list. So when this list was created, it was empty. When you appended that, what is going to happen? The value book will be added to this list. And when you say 99, 99 is also added. So if you print stuff, it will be book and 99. One is a string and the other one is a integer. And then you can append anything with this. So that is the append method. And then how do you check if you want to see whether an element is part of a list? So you have an element here. You can use a command, means a value called in, operator called in. It's again an overloaded operator. It means it will check whether this value, this member or element is there in that list. So in this particular case, 9 is in the list sum, so it will be true. If I say 25, it will say false. Then you can use the Boolean function also here. You can say 20 not in sum. These are very useful. These are very useful things later in the machine learning, because in some language you have to write all these codes. You have to see, check each element and then say if nan. Suppose you need to implement this in C. How do you do this?
I think C might be having an index of. So
Right.
you check if index of greater than 0.
Yep. No, I think suppose you have a index, a linked list, and how do you see that whether a particular value is in the linked list?
You
You have to
iterate.
get into a for loop or a while loop and then do
Yeah.
array by array, you know.
Right.
Not array by array,
Element by element, right? So what is the problem in that? Performance. Here also, internally, that might be what is happening, right?
Yeah.
But there is a difference. When the Python standard library is there, it is our code. When we write, we do all the nonsenses, but this is the most optimized code for that operation. So the performance is definitely higher than here. And then the next one is this one. Like, see, a list can hold many items, right? And how to change the order of the list. So here you have a list like Joseph, Glenn, and Sally, and you can use a function called sort. And then when you print, what is going to happen? This would have sorted this
alphabetically.
Yeah, alphabetically. And you can sort based on different criteria, etc. So you can look at the function. Functions help. And then there are a lot of other functions which can give you valuable information. Length, we have seen that. What is length? It will give the number of elements in the list, right?
Yeah.
So then max means what?
Maximum value.
So let me ask you a question. So if you put max and on a heterogeneous list, what would be the answer?
It will be the max ASCII value.
Can you find out?
Yeah, so the string, like if there's a string as an element in a list which has got all numbers, the string has a numeric value based on the ASCII value of the characters in the string.
Yeah, can you try it later, not now, and just confirm it? Yeah. Okay. Just try this one. Just try, because two examples I would say. Not now. Like you can try once this is over. Means even means I have to go at 9. So if you want to continue, you can try. Two things I would try. One is using a max function in a heterogeneous list. That is question number 1.
It will throw an error.
Using the max function. Now that's why yeah, I don't want to comment, but
max is not supported.
Right?
If it is going to be only integer, it's okay. Heterogeneous max is not supported. Even min is not supported. Sum is not supported.
Yeah. So just do it so that you don't forget it, because that's why it means earliest when you guys told me the answer, I said it's okay. You don't need to do. But two things you want to try. One is a heterogeneous string and list, and the next is a list within a list. Try that. That's it. So let's continue. The min function, you can do that later. Min function will return minimum, sum will return the sum, and sum and the length will give you the average. So let's go to another case. So here what is going to happen is, can you interpret this program for me? What do you see on the screen? While true means what? So let's start from there.
Infinite loop.
Yep. Then what is going to happen?
Yeah.
Well, what is true? It's not specified.
Yeah.
It is always true. So it will be an infinite loop, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
We need to break it.
You have to break it. That's why the moment you give that, make sure that your the body of the loop, which is that block, should have a break. So then what is going to happen? Can you interpret that program for me? What means when you go to the first line, what is going to happen?
It prints the average of all the numbers that you enter.
Right. And what time the loop will execute
till you
Until
enter.
you're done.
Done. Okay. So now let me ask you a question. So when you say enter a number, you say John, what is going to happen?
It will be the same type error.
Right. You get an error.
Yeah.
So if you want to cover that error, what you need to do? Remember, we studied that.
Exception
Right.
catch, exception handling.
Yeah, exception handling. Exactly. So great. Excellent. This is good. So string and a list, you can consider them as good friends. So what happens is, so this ABC is a string, right? Suppose you use this function called split. What is going to happen? I think I didn't explain this to you. It will split the string into smaller groups. So typically by default, it will use the space as the delimiter. So it will give 3 different values, right? So print the stuff means it will create a list of 3 different string. That is what this function does. And if you print the length of the stuff, it will be 3 because it is splitted using the delimiter space. And this split, you can use another delimiter. Whatever delimiter you give, that delimiter will be used. And if you don't use any delimiter, it will be always space. So so here what happens means, suppose you want to print all the different stuff, you use a for loop. Stuff is a list because the split function of the string, it is splitted into a list, and that is why the for loop works here without any problem. Got it, right?
No, but if you why is it comma not being used? It's because the stuff is a comma delimited string.
No, actually the string is with tree stuffs, right? So here what you did was you created a means when you printed a stuff, the individual elements are what?
Okay,
String.
yeah, got it. Yeah, it's already split and then now it is putting it as.
Yeah.
There's no comma in the original string.
No. And also there is no comma also in the list element. It is just showing that it is string.
Just for showing, yeah. Okay.
So remember when we studied the file, what happens? Every line of the file has a delimiter, a new line character. So when Python prints, it always append one new line, right? So remember last week we said, like, if you want to avoid that, you have to use a write strip. So here it's just for showing, that's it. Okay, so when you don't specify a delimiter, what happens? Means if there are multiple spaces, so what is going to happen? Multiple space will be considered as just one delimiter. That's what it is. And then the second thing is, you can always say that what exactly is the delimiter you want to do. So here you have a lot of spaces. So what you can see is there is a lot of space here. So if you use the split function here, it will again only give 1, 2, 3, 4, and it won't consider multiple spaces as a problem. It will just consider it as only one. And here, the next example, you have a string, but first you have a different delimiter here, right? You have a semicolon. So if you use a space, the default split function, the delimiter will be called as space. And then when you try to use space as the delimiter, what do you get?
You will not split it.
Yeah, it will not split
Just
it.
with a single element.
Exactly. So if you want to split it using the delimiter, you have to use the appropriate delimiter here. So look at the difference between this function and this function. When you omit the argument, what it means, the default argument would be space. That's it. Okay. So let's go to another example. There is an email. Means this is a like there is a file. That file had an email, right? This is the first line. And then what you do, you for line in fhand, because remember the file handle is a connection to the file, to the data of the file. And what you do means the handle is considered as a collection. So it's a collection of lines, right? Different strings. So first time when this loop executes, it will fetch the first line from the file. So line dot r strip, and if not line, start with from, continue. Otherwise, what you do, split and print words, the second element. So what is going to happen here? If the line is not starting from, right? So the first line it will skip, then the next line it will pull, and then it will split based on space, and it will print the third element from that. That is what the logic of this program. Okay, so then double split pattern. So what happens sometimes, and then this is what it is. Let's say that this is the words, and then what you say, line dot split, and then what you do when you split it, what is going to happen? It will split based upon the space. So this is the 0th element in the split. Split will return a list, right? Remember, split will return a list, and each item in the list would be everything up to the space. So the first item in the list would be from. The second item would be what? Stephen dot host at you up to here, right?
Right.
So when you say email, it is the first item in that list created by the split function. Correct?
Yeah.
Oh, yep. So that's what happens here. Okay. So that's now what you can do is the double split pattern, right? So this words of one, what you got is you got an email ID, and what you can do, you can split this again. So this email is basically a string, and you can use that means you can use the split function there. And if you use this at function there, what is going to happen?
It will split at that position.
Split. So this is called double split. You splitted the entire string first, and then one element of that split, which is an item in the list, can be again splitted. So you can use, so technically it's not just double split, it can go up to any number of split. That's what it is. So this is the summary of the list. So we talked about the concept of a collection. We borrowed our idea from the data structure we studied long time back. And then we talked about what is list and how the list can be used with loops. And we talked about indexing, and we talked about how to look up an item in a list. Remember, in function, in operator. And we talked about the mutability, because it is means difference between one key difference between string and the list. And we talked about some of the list function, length, minimum, maximum, and sum. We talked about the slicing of the list. We talked about the list methods, append and remove, sorting of the list. We saw that it's very simple, just dot sort, and splitting strings into multiple lists and words, and using split to parse the string. Remember, that is the last thing. We parse an email ID. And this parsing and all, it is very easy, right, compared to the other language. When I was studying, I had to do a project in data structure to create a compiler for the language called Sparks. So whenever you create a compiler, right, the parsing is very critical. So at that point of time in C, it was such a difficult thing. If these methods were available, it was such an easy thing. Okay, so Ornabji, you are compiling some questions, right? The samples, problems.
Yes.
Okay, so you can put that, and you can refer that Python. What was that, Rajesh? That book, code practice Python. There was a code, right?
Yeah, the book. Yeah, I just shared. I have all the books there in the group now.
No.
That was.
And I have just one more question before I get out of a call at 9. So the next 3 topics, which is set, then you have the tuples, those things, right? Dictionary you have. So anybody wants to do a try, means those who are familiar with that topic, means if you want to facilitate a discussion, we can go a little bit faster. So you can meet one more time offline and do that. I can give the PowerPoint, little bit customize the PowerPoint from this University of Michigan. And if nobody is there, definitely we'll continue next Wednesday. But if you want to accelerate and group in between and go a little bit, take a little bit speed on Python, anybody volunteering, you can do that.
The book was the workbook.
Yeah, the workbook.
Yeah, I think Satish also had shared it.
Arnabji, you want to try one session?
Sure.
One session?
When can we do it?
Anytime. You can coordinate with the team, right? Or even means, as I said, like it is going to whoever is facilitating, it is going to help them a lot. I can send you the PowerPoint.
Please send me the PowerPoint. Maybe if everyone's available, we can probably do it on Friday, since we don't have a class on Friday.
Yep. So I'll send you the PowerPoint.
Sorry, Friday would be difficult.
Oh yeah, Friday would be difficult. Friday, let's give Friday as a family time. I won't do anything on Friday, so that's my policy. Friday at 5 shut down, and then I'll pick up only at Saturday afternoon.
Let's see what everybody comes back on the chat. Depending on that.
Yeah. Just coordinate. Anyway, Arnabji, I'm going to give you the PowerPoints. 3 PowerPoints I'll send you.
Sure.
Or you can just share it in the group.
Yeah, I'm going to share.
In the group chat.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Stay safe, and we will talk next Monday. We are going to go a little bit more complicated topic, the gradient descent on neural networks.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.